I would say there is today no real difference between e-government strategies and IT strategies in government. So I would say a good definition is the use of IT, well, actually information and communication technology, to improve service delivery, to improve operation, and to improve the ability of government and each individual agency to fulfill its mission. I think the objectives are indeed the same. I think if we take them one by one, certainly the original objective has always been to improve the way services are delivered to people, information is delivered to people, and so forth. The second objective is to improve the operational efficiency of government, so to make government operation less expensive in a sense and more effective. And the third one is to allow each individual, well, could be city, region, state, agency, whatever, to meet its strategic goals. What has happened though over the last few years, I would say, there has been a shift from the first objective, so service delivery, improving the quality of life of citizens and the way they relate to government, to the second one, increasing operational efficiency. As a result, if you like, of the economic crisis, the financial crisis, the recession, especially in the Western world, so the US, and today pretty much so in Europe. Most of the government strategies and investment do relate to how do we make government less expensive. I think it is a combination of things. There are two different aspects. The first one is the vision. So is the vision for that particular government strategy sensible? Is it too ambitious? And the second one is the ability to execute. So does the government have what it takes to execute on that strategy? And that is a function of several things, like political willingness, of course, like the availability of money, like the flexibility in managing the budget so that when objectives change, the budgets can follow the new objectives and so forth. But I would say the common problem is perhaps the level of ambition. Most of the e-government endeavors are multi-year kind of programs. It could take 5 years. And in many countries you have at least one election in between. So what happens usually is that politicians, when they get into the campaigning mode, they will try to get to some quick wins, short-term results that are often incompatible with the longer-term nature of the government. The other part, which I think is very important, is the lack of flexibility of certain government processes. So I think I mentioned the budget. The matter is not the lack of money. The matter is the inability of using the money effectively. So for instance, if you want to achieve certain objectives in the government, you need to manage a budget across agencies or across ministries, whatever the country is. The problem is the budget is often owned by an agency or a ministry. So to actually get the money to come together and be used in sync across different agencies, it's probably pretty challenging. Interestingly enough, being less ambitious. Actually, there are two things. The first one is you really need to have a kind of 5-year strategy to say, well, this is what we are aiming at. But then when it comes to implementation, dividing the program into smaller chunks where you can prove value, where you can test whether people even care about what you've done, where you start measuring the results, measuring the impact, and then move forward, is probably the good strategy. Unfortunately, that's the way it works in government. People set the strategy, then they start these large programs, and it's just, they go for 5 years and God knows what happens. I think being less ambitious in the way they implement and being more demanding in the way they measure the outcome, they measure whether people use those services, and they measure whether they're actually gaining an efficiency, is probably the better way to unstuck, as you said, the current e-government strategy. I think they do need an IT strategy. I'm not sure the term e-government makes much sense. I remember a few years ago we were discussing in Gartner, should we get rid of this term? And we were trying not to use it with our clients because, e-government had become government, right? It was pretty much part of the normal course of business. But still our clients and many government folks around the world like the term. I prefer to say, well, you need e-government as much as you need IT. IT is now, I think, fundamental to every single operation of every enterprise, including government. So the answer is yes, they need it. They just need to make it, let me say, less special. It's more, as I said, part of the normal course of things they do, rather than looking at it as something totally different from what they do every day. The more they can actually bring it in sync with their normal operations, with the way they actually look at it becomes the way they look at other investment, the better it is. The other dimension which I think is important that has started emerging, for instance, in the United States, is the shift from what people call e-government to the concept of government 2.0. Government 2.0 means where people, citizens, start having a greater impact in how services are delivered, in how information is processed, in how information is created, and so forth. It's all this issue of collaboration, participation, transparency. I think that particular move that we see actually moving from the US into Europe and now making it headway into Asia and Australia is probably going to give a greater impulse to what we used to call e-government strategy. I think one of the best practices in the world remains Singapore. Now, Singapore clearly is a city-state, so it's in a sense it's a simpler government than many other countries where you have multiple tiers of government, federal, state, regional, local, and so forth. So they certainly had a better luck in addressing their e-government strategies. This being said, they've been pretty consistent in achieving their objectives. They've been the first one, or among the first one, of using the concept of citizen centricity. If you look at how they're moving now, I think they announced that about a month ago, or less than a month ago, their new strategy for the next 5 years. They keep challenging themselves. So they make the cut, and then they raise the bar higher and higher, and they always make it. As I said, there are special conditions that I don't think apply in many other countries, but I think that remains a very good example of how far eGov can go.